Hey everyone, Gil here at Camppatton Family Compound. But I'm in California with my fantastic wife, Cris, and she's going to give us a tour of her garden here in California. So this is part 2 of Chris's California garden tour.
Guys going because we like boysenberries. You can see the row of roses. I deadhead at least once a week, and because I am actually watering them a whole lot better this year, they are doing absolutely fantastically wonderfully, because most people in August have some really pathetic rose bushes, and these guys, I think that they also kind of like having this tree shade them a little bit. You know, I have roses on both sides. This side, it tends to get a little bit more powdery mildew because of the tree, whereas the other side is a little bit more dried out all the time. But we've got happy roses. This guy is a Nandina. He came from the big Nandina. He just kind of started growing in this pot, so I just let him. And then I've got some lavender that I was trying to grow lavender. I've been trying to start it for years and years and years, and it started growing in here, presumably from a plant that I had purchased. Some seeds blew in, and so I'm just leaving the lavender there because, golly, I can't seem to get it to germinate. So these sunflowers are offspring from mine from last year. What happens is the squirrels come along, they chew off the little heads, and even on my sunflowers, they come along and they often will sit on the fence and they just eat. And I've cleaned up a lot of the detritus matter. This is kind of the pile that I've made, but they make a massive mess, and they're just little thieves.
So the seeds get spread everywhere.
Seeds get spread everywhere. Did you want to do the front very
Yeah,
front?
let's take a look at the front.
Okay. So many years ago, I planted this whole front row were these guys, and a few years back we had a really bad drought, and so the city was offering free reclaimed water. So we went and we were getting buckets, just the massive totes full of reclaimed water. Well, what we didn't realize was how salty that water was. And so we were using it pretty exclusively to irrigate the entire front yard. And we almost lost a number of things, and we lost the vast majority of these. So what I've done is I've gone and I've gotten the boxwood and the pygmy bayberry, or Burberry rather, and I've started planting them along. So those other 5-gallon pots that I showed you up at the top, they're supposed to replace these guys. I just don't have the heart to dig them out at this point. So when I cleaned out this whole thing last year, I planted several sets of bulbs. So these are my summer flowering. They're a cousin of a dang it, the ones that go really tall. Your mom loved them. Anyhow, so I do have.
Bird of Paradise?
No. I have them in the back too.
Oh, Naked Ladies?
So I have some, the very first crocus. I have a row of crocus in here, and then right behind them I have a row of anemones, and then we've got a little bit of space for something else that I would like to figure out another bulb to put in there. And then I've got these guys at the very back. I mean, you can see by the nature of it what kind of a plant it is. But yeah, so this is what I've got going in the front.
There's the basil forest.
Nope, that's the
borage forest, yeah.
This is another plant that in California you just can't get away from. They have both the pygmy version and the full-size version. This is Lily of the Nile. And I do have to caution people, man, when you see this stuff coming up in your yard, and if it's in a spot that you don't want taken over by it, get it out of there. I found this stuff. Yeah, there was one year that I spent an awful lot of time digging the sucker out because it happened to. They send out runners and they will just kind of sort of come up wherever they want to come up. And so anyhow, you have to do a lot of maintenance with the lily of the Nile things. So cautionary tale. California is just all properties in California. It seems like everybody's got this, and they've got the midnight willy plant that I never can remember the name of. Now these are the roses on the other side. These ones get a whole lot more sun, and you can see that the borage has really taken over. But you know, the bees love the borage. They absolutely love borage. My yard is so alive with hummingbirds and bees and butterflies, and I just love it.
There's the bees. A lot of bees in there. Heading into the side yard.
So we have this big arbor. It is shading our bedroom window, which is needed because this is the really hot side of the house. This really pathetic looking plant is a passion fruit vine. And here in California, can't really eat the passion fruit. They don't do what they do in Hawaii. But part of the reason why I grow this vine is the incredibly beautiful orange butterflies that eat these leaves, lay their eggs. Oh, there's one. Can you get it? I've been told that is the passion caterpillar. It's a little bit smaller than a monarch, but it's just as beautifully bright orange. And that is the sole purpose behind allowing this plant to look horrid, because I love these butterflies. Between the butterflies and the hummingbirds that I have in here, it's just this is my little Eden. So we've got some these are table grapes. I've done a better job of pruning this year, but I didn't thin quite as many of the fruits off as I should have. We've never really had terribly large grapes, and the critters tend to get them before we do, but I have done a better job being home all the time. So these are the Thompson seedless, and I can't remember what the blush variety is, but
Ruby red.
Ruby reds, okay. And our wisteria is a purple wisteria, and I now know exactly what those firecracker noises are. You can probably get a great shot of all the seeds that are still down on the ground. So the pods are will stay on there all winter, and then in the early spring they start to burst. They drop their pods, and you know, it's funny the amount of noise that gets made. I did not realize that was what the noise was that I was hearing, that it was these guys exploding and dropping their seeds everywhere. The things we pick up from our neighbors. So we have another apricot and a very, very large pot. I would say that they really aren't super happy in pots. This guy would much prefer to be in the ground, but he's not going up to Idaho because he's not going to make it up in Idaho. He's actually very, very diseased. The core is just about toast. Most of this is off of a sucker on the side, and I do get fruit on it, but quite honestly, the critters get this one before I can get any of it. They don't get very big. This is my food, this is my Granny Smith, and I've been working on thinning, and I still have a lot more thinning that needed to be done, and we did not spray. We have not sprayed in, like, I don't know if we've ever sprayed.
Never.
And so we do get bugs, but quite honestly, there's so many apples on it that I'm not too worried about the bugs. I just eat around them. So this is the Schefflera. This is actually something that has survived since my mother-in-law passed away. We still have several plants that she had. We have more grapes back here. The pomegranate, I planted this guy in the ground this spring. I've actually had him for more than 2 years in a pot. He was a variety that's supposed to grow really well in a pot, and he does stay more shrub-like than tree-like. But this year I actually have some really, really nice pomegranates on it. It's the first time that I've gotten some. This is my biggest fruit right here. And I'm really happy for a plant that is this young, you know, to have such good fruit. These are pumpkins, they're mini pumpkins, and they are doing absolutely fantabulously when you compare them to the size of the other pumpkins that I've got going, which were all germinated at the exact same time. These are definitely the ones that are the most happy. We have, oops, you gotta watch out for the ground around here. So we've got another apple tree. This is my Fuji. And you can see it also needs a whole lot more thinning. I really have been thinning this tree. It's hard to believe it when you look at it. I guess as they start to get bigger, it becomes much, much more obvious. These are just daylilies. I do have an awful lot of orange ones. The daylilies that I rescued from Idaho are out front. I did have a pot that I rescued at the same time as the irises. They also bloomed this year, and they are also a version of orange. But I do have, I have planted a few other varieties. These were all daylilies that I got from the store.
This.
So that is an asparagus fern, and it tends to have babies all over the place too. I have several in the ground, and I have more in a pot. This is society garlic. Those two big brown wads are actually the mother plants. All those other little things around it are things that have just grown as I've been watering. The lava rock is stuff that was my mother-in-law's. We brought it all back, and I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with it. And I planted all of these last year. Friend was giving away some pots. She's a local grower. She does propagation and everything, and she grows for the Ruth Bancroft Garden. And every now and then she has a little too much, and so the salvias are actually the easiest of all of the things to grow. These are salvias. These are another thing that if you just pinch them off, you stick them in water, they'll grow roots, and then you can stick them in the ground. They're super easy to propagate. So this was Gil's first attempt at doing a self-watering system. For the most part, it worked pretty well. What I do is I do top water, and I look down here and check the level of the water. And so when I top watered, I've got a lot of water in there, and so I actually can drain this a little bit if I want to. This is a cupcake squash. For those of you who are not familiar with what a cupcake squash is, last year I bought what I thought was a patty pan. It was marked a patty pan, but then this started to grow and I didn't know what the heck it was. So it was a burpee seed last year, and so that is indeed a cupcake squash. This is a second generation cupcake squash. I saved the seeds from both my cupcake squash and my spaghetti squash last year. So I planted the cupcake squash, and I have a cupcake squash. I planted the spaghetti squash, and I got that monster huge vine out there that you saw in the front yard that took me a while to figure out what it was. The cupcake squash and the spaghetti squash were grown in the same bed last year, and they should not have cross-pollinated. One's a winter squash, one's a summer squash, and so I did look them up. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to save my seeds. Am I going to stay true? Yeah, they didn't. At least not in this case of the spaghetti squash. So this is a spaghetti squash that I grew last year, and yeah, it is past being able to be eaten at this point. And so its plant was growing right next to the cupcake squash. So second generation on the cupcake squash, looks like a cupcake squash. Second generation on the spaghetti squash, looks like neither. So I'm not quite sure how that happened, that the cupcake stayed true and the spaghetti squash did not, but basically I have a very fat zucchini for my second generation. So this is a whole lot closer to what a patty pan is supposed to be. This was actually billed as a white scallop, although you can see that it's not terribly white. It is a whole lot closer to a patty pan. Now, what I've done here, you're probably wondering, what in the world is going on with my squash? So I was looking at somebody else's site, and they suggested that you try trellising, or staking rather, your summer squash. So I'm staking it, giving it, so this guy I think has just way too much of a wandering disposition, and I may gently lay him back down again. He's not taking to the staking thing very well. Whereas the cupcake squash, you can see he only has one short one here, and he's doing much better. But yeah, the scallop is definitely kind of like all over the place. So this is a navel orange tree that was growing in a pot when my mother-in-law passed away. We found a place here to grow the navel orange tree, and it exploded. I mean, it went from being a 4-foot tree to a 6-foot tree in 1 year, and then now I'm topping it and trimming it and trying to keep it down to size, because I really do like to use my walkways. You see that I need to trim again because it is just all over everywhere. So these are my 2 cherry trees. This guy's not doing quite as well. I think he might have some borers in him. I need to put some of the right oil stuff down. But because I do have a living ground cover, I am a little concerned with treating the ground. I do realize that there are a lot of insects that live down in the soil, and they come up into the tree to feed, especially, they go into the soil in the winter and they feed in the tree. I've got just lots of things that had been left in this corner, and now, excuse me if this is offensive, now Wandering Jew has pretty much taken over the whole thing. If there is another word for it, you guys can leave it in the comments and tell me what the other name is, because I certainly don't mean to offend anybody, but that is what I grew up knowing it's called as. And it definitely sprawls. This is our Blenheim apricot. We chose a Blenheim specifically because I grew up in an apricot orchard, and we dried our apricots, and this was the best variety for drying. This is a mandarin tangerine. It is an ultra dwarf. It is supposed to be this teeny tiny, although it is very much overshadowed by the apricot, which was supposed to be a dwarf that isn't, and this other navel orange. So we actually have 3 different varieties of navel oranges. This allows us to have oranges throughout a much longer period in the year. This particular variety actually stores its orange on the tree really, really well. So we've got navel orange number 2, and this is navel orange number 3. You can see that this is a completely different variety of orange by the way that the orange looks. It does have a thicker skin, but it is incredibly juicy in there. So this is my peach tree. I know it looks incredibly pathetic, but it grew after I did the proper thinning this year, and I had some really nice, big, fat, very, very juicy, like dribbling down your face type juice peaches. They were absolutely wonderful. This is our Meyer lemon. And our key lime. And my artichoke bed. I'm letting the flowers go to, I'm letting these flower just because these are the very, very last artichokes of the season. And actually this is a second generation plant. The big plant has already died back and everything. And yeah, the ants are having a fantastic time, but I don't think I've ever actually let it, this one looks like it's going to do a much prettier job of flowering than that one did. But all of these are second generation. You can see that they're just starting to come up. This bed was absolutely massively huge this year. It just kept, artichoke, it was a really, really good spring for artichokes. They were just super happy. So, I had 2 pots. You can see the other very beat up pot. I had artichokes in these 2 pots, and that's what I ended up putting them into when I needed to separate them. I put them in the big bed. I did grow greens in here, and I will grow greens in here again as it starts to cool down a little bit. These actually bolted and started getting bitter by mid to late May. It was already too hot for the greens. And I do understand that, you can grow greens year-round in California. I just haven't found the right knack yet. There's a lot of things that I'm still learning. And I think that we have covered.
Last grapes.
Well, I don't know that we want to talk about those, but okay. We do have 3 other grapevines up here, but quite honestly, these guys, I just keep chopping and the critters get them. I did have some wonderful little clusters down here underneath, and I identified them one day, and the very next day they were all on the ground. So
yeah, there's nothing left of this one.
We have a lot of squirrels, and I did put cayenne pepper on all the fence lines, but it didn't do a whole lot of good for the squirrels. So they pretty much get everything that's back here. We also strongly suspect that there are some rats living in either the palm trees next door, or very likely the wood pile in the back. The neighbors have a wood pile in the back, and so I'm really confident that we do have rats eating apples every night. We have squirrels certainly stealing apples, stealing sunflower heads. You can see that even up here, even as high as this, they're still getting in here. They're getting in here. They're munching. These are ripe. These are yummy. These are sweet. So you can't blame them. I'm probably going to have to do something to protect my pomegranates at some point, because they're going to eat those too. But the apples will be all over the ground at that point, so hopefully they'll go after the apples and not my pomegranates. Thanks for joining us. I'm so happy that you could see what we've got growing in California.